Okay, so today we're reading Sif Gimel and Daled, Sif 3 and 4 in Siman Tzadik Beis, section 92, the laws of ChaNaN, or I should say the application of ChaNaN. There's a lot of detail to cover, so we're going to read and translate as we always do and add halachic insight as we go along. So let's begin. Gimel. Every time, we're just starting. Gimel. When a piece of meat becomes forbidden because of milk, so nasis, because there's no 60 ratio, according to the Ramah, or the flavor is detectable by a non-Jew as per Machaber, the nasis kol hachaticha iser, the entire piece now becomes a forbidden item, and not simply an item that has absorbed something else that is forbidden, but the entire piece itself is forbidden. As we explained in our intro share, the principle, the rationale, because milk and meat in and of themselves are not forbidden, it's in their combination that's forbidden. So in their once they've gone through the process of combination, right? Once they've gone through the process of combination, they now become forbidden items themselves. Unlike bread, which absorbs non-kosher flavor, it's not the bread itself that is a problem; it's the flavor that's inside the bread. Whereas with milk and meat, it's their mixture that's the problem, and therefore every single part of it is part of the mixture, and every single part of it is also. And as you explained on Sunday, even if you're capable of extracting the flavor of the milk from the meat, it wouldn't make a difference. It's still also the meat is also because it went through the process of being combined with milk and meat. And therefore, and therefore, if this piece of meat, you happy with me? And if this piece of meat got cooked with others, you require 60 in the entire mixture, lavatal kula, to nullify the entire piece of meat and not just the milk that's been absorbed in the meat. V'makira, if you can identify that piece of meat, mashlicha, you have to throw that piece of meat out. V'acheres, and the other pieces of meat, mitaros, are permissible because now it's just a question of the flavor that has emanated from that non-kosher piece because it's been mixed with milk.
Because it's 60.
And therefore, it's 60 to the ratio of that flavor, of that piece of meat. So just thinking about if you want to use language to explain ChaNaN, how something becomes forbidden, in every other prohibition, it's something kosher absorbing something forbidden. In milk and meat, it's the mixture of the two. It's not the absorption, it's the mixture of the two that makes it asr. So every single part of it is asr because they're all part of the mixture. So the entire meat is asr because the meat itself is part of the mixture that makes it forbidden. Yeah, clear? The main makira, and if you don't know where the piece is, but you know one of the pieces of meat has milk in it, or one of those pieces of meat, better put, is a milk and meat piece. So aroitiv mutter, the gravy is permissible, and let the vegetables in there as well. And any pieces of meat are forbidden. Im if the piece of meat that absorbed the milk, the forbidden piece of meat because it's absorbed milk, is a piece of meat worthy of honor, worthy of something, right? So we explained in our introduction here that biblically speaking, when you have one kosher piece, one kosher item, it's chad b'treis bottle. One is nullified in two. So if you have one non-kosher piece and two kosher pieces, and you're not sure which of the three is the non-kosher one, they're all kosher, nullified. That's usually the halacha. That's the biblical halacha. Our sages forbade that, but they only forbade that if the pieces of meat or the piece of non-kosher meat is itself worthy of something. But if it's a little sliver, it doesn't have that stringency of not being nullified in majority, and therefore this piece of meat. Let's just imagine a piece of meat that absorbed. Okay, two scenarios. Scenario A, the piece of meat that absorbed the milk is a tiny little sliver that's not worthy of anything. It got mixed into the stew. I don't know where it is. Everything's kosher. As long as you have 60 times the ratio of that little sliver of meat, which you probably will in a stew. Scenario A. Scenario B is you're making a pot roast with a bunch of minute steaks. So each minute steak is worthy of service. It's worthy of note. It's a meal in of itself. You would serve that minute steak alone. And one of them absorbed milk, and therefore it itself became a prohibited item. You don't know which one it is, and you have 6 of them in the pot. Now, in addition to those 6 pieces of mini steak, you also have little slivers of meat throughout the stew. What do you have to remove? What do you have to remove? Only the mini steaks. Only those pieces that are possibly the one that absorbed the non-kosher and is a royal iskabed and is a something worthy, that those have to be removed because they're not nullified by the majority of the other kosher pieces of meat.
They're the roitiv, with the whole roitiv, including the meat.
The roitiv would be okay. It's right. The gravy would be okay. The vegetables would be okay, and even little slivers of meat would be okay. Only the slivers, only the meat that could have been the one that absorbed the milk is removed, which means only the ones that are royal iskabed, only the ones that are worthy of your.
So meat that basically would be a meal.
Because the question was they absorb.
It's because all the mixture is nullifying the original one in 60, but I just don't know what the original one is. So biblically speaking, I can eat all of them because I don't know which one the original one is. But rabbinically, I'm removing all the ones that it could be. But I'm only removing the ones that it could be if the ones that it could be are royal iskabed, are worthy of honor. Is literally how do they translate it? Worthy of honor? Worthy of respect. Worthy of being treated as like a piece of meat. Yeah, okay, clear?
It was just a standalone thing.
It's a standalone piece of meat. The details of that are going to come up in the details of royal iskabed. They're going to come in later simon. Right? There's details of royal iskabed. Okay, that clear? Yeah, okay. So firstly, as we already noted on Sunday, the idea of ChaNaN, Chati, Chanas, and Avela when it comes to milk and meat is a biblical problem, because biblically speaking, the prohibition is the mixture. So the milk and the meat are both part of the mixture, and therefore they are both completely forbidden. It's not as if the meat is kosher, but the milk makes it forbidden. No, the meat itself is part of the prohibited problem because it's part of the mixture, right? We explained this on Sunday. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about here? Yes? You familiar with this principle? Yeah? The reason why milk and meat that mix together, the meat itself becomes forbidden and not just the milk in it, right? Is because what's the prohibition of milk and meat? Which item is prohibited?
Cooking.
Neither. So what's the prohibited thing?
Cooking.
The mixture.
Cooking.
So the mixture which Torah, biblically speaking, good point, is a mixture that happens through cooking. So the cooking of milk and meat together become forbidden. So which part of this steak that now has milk in it is forbidden? Not the milk. The milk is totally kosher. It's the mixture of milk and meat. So which part of the meat is part of the mixture? Every part of the meat is part of the mixture. So the entire meat is a non-kosher piece. That's a biblical fact. Right? Now, as we're going to learn the next sieve, the Ramah is of the view that we treat ChaNaN even by other prohibitions, right? If a piece of meat or absorb non-kosher fat, we treat an entire piece of meat as a prohibited item, even though it's not true. The meat is kosher. It's only absorbed non-kosher flavor, but we're going to treat the entire thing as if it's prohibited. That's only a rabbinic concern, not a biblical one, right? So now, what happens if the milk and meat mixture is itself rabbinic? How would that be? How would milk and meat mixture be rabbinic? No, anybody? How would milk and meat mixture only be rabbinic?
They're not cooked.
If it's not cooked together, they were salted together, they were pickled together, or if it's chicken and milk. So now, do I apply the biblical standard that their mixture becomes prohibited? Now the entire piece of chicken is a non-kosher piece of chicken. Let's make it practical. A piece of chicken absorbs milk. There's no 60 ratio.
You could be a little more lenient than assuming it's rabbinic.
Oh, so let's 1 second. Let's see. Sorry.
How about fish and
milk?
How about fish and milk?
Okay, so fish and milk is a question of, we're going to get to those halachas, but that's a question of danger, not a question of kosher.
Danger.
Yeah. Milk and meat is a health consideration, not a halachic one. So we're going to put that aside for now, because in some ways it's actually more stringent, because chamira sakanta misura in some ways, but we'll get to that when we get there. So let's imagine the case of a chicken. So a piece of chicken absorbs, a little piece of schnitzel gets some milk in it. The schnitzel is small, so there's no 60 ratio to the milk. Now this piece of chicken is not kosher. Great. Now this chicken falls into your stew, into your pot. Do I need 60 times the ratio of milk into your chicken soup with a bunch of other pieces of chicken that are in it? Yeah. Do I need 60 times the ratio of the milk or 60 times the ratio of the entire chicken nugget? Sorry? So if I say ChaNaN, if I say the piece of meat itself becomes prohibited, I need 60 to the ratio of the chicken. If I say that I treat it like other prohibitions, in which if a kosher item absorbs not kosher item, I need 60 to the ratio of the not kosher item. I don't need 60 to the ratio of the entire piece of meat. Right? Which one do I treat it like? You following my question?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So the halacha is that it is treated like other prohibitions, and therefore it's subject to the dispute of Rama and Sfardi Ashkenazi, Rama and Machaber. Machaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, is of the view that only basar b'chalav has ChaNaN, only actual biblical milk and meat has the ChaNaN, and therefore if milk and meat were pickled together, the entire meat doesn't become non-kosher. It's only the milk that absorbed in it that becomes a problem when you mix into the next thing, not the entire piece of meat. Whereas the Rama would say, no, it is, the entire item is not kosher because it absorbed milk, just like a piece of meat absorbs non-kosher fat. I treat the entire piece of meat as if it's not kosher, according to Rama. Clear? Because it's rabbinic. Now, even though, as we're going to learn, Rama is lenient, is stringent, and says that we apply ChaNaN even to other prohibitions, not just basar b'chalav, not just milk and meat. But because that is only a rabbinic consideration, we can, in many instances, be lenient, as we're going to learn in the next paragraph. Therefore, the same thing would apply to milk and chicken.
Before the next paragraph.
Clear? Yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, before the next paragraph. Just on what we're learning over here, that if it wasn't, if it was royal iskabe,
Yeah.
right? But there was a great loss. And say over here.
If it's really it's a great loss. I don't think because you're saying it's rabbinic. Because it's only a rabbinic.
No, it's basar b'chalav.
Right, but it should be batel chad b'trei, biblically.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is that your question?
Right.
Good question. I don't know the answer. I don't see any indication in this sefer at least that you should be lenient. So I'm going to say you stay stringent because I don't see any indication. Otherwise it would specify somewhere. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, more details in Kuf Aleph, I suppose. Kuf Aleph is the laws of royal iskabetz. We'll have to wait to see for there. Maybe there'll be something there. So we'll put a pin in that till Kuf Aleph. Okay, one more item. Okay, so we're clear. Basar b'chalav, milk and meat that's mixed together biblically becomes biblically ChaNaN. If it's only mixed together rabbinic, then we don't apply that same high standard. We're going to treat it like other prohibitions that have been absorbed in meat, where we apply the dispute between Mechaber and Rama whether or not we say ChaNaN. Clear? Yes? Okay, one last thing about ChaNaN is, and we're going to come back to this soon, which is if something is parev and it absorbs both milk and meat, do I apply ChaNaN as well?
It's cooked.
So now the entire parev item is considered a non-kosher item, and if that were to fall into something else, you'd have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire parev item, not just 60 to the ratio of the milk and meat that the parev item absorbed.
Right after each other, everything.
All of it, yeah. Do I need 60 to the ratio of the parev item because it absorbs milk and meat, or just 60 to the ratio of the milk and meat? And the answer is it's a machlekes.
They didn't get cooked inside the.
Sorry?
It would be rabbinic, probably, right?
It's rabbinic, yeah. So it's machlekes. Whether you treat it like ChaNaN, at least rabbinic ChaNaN, like you would by other Yisurim according to Rama.
Because it's still active, both flavors are still active and they mix together.
Correct. That would be the reason to say it is ChaNaN, right? But at the same time, the piece of bread, let's say, is not a non-kosher item. It absorbed non-kosher. The non-kosher absorbed happens to be milk and meat, but it itself is kosher. So why do I have to have ratio 60 to the ratio of the bread? Just have 60 to the ratio of the milk and meat that's in the bread, right? That's a counter argument. The same way you would say by other Yisurim. Yeah.
I have a application question.
Yeah.
So you as an Ashkenazi would you would eat in a Moroccan's household because it's a very big difference.
That's a very good question. So this wouldn't be my major concern, because if I were eating in a Sephardi household,
The glass pots would be.
it's not very often that a Sephardic household has a piece of meat that absorbs something non-kosher.
It could be a very, very
Well,
yeah.
then it's milk and meat, then for sure everybody agrees it's a problem, right? But it's not very common that a Sephardic home has a non-kosher fat that fell into a piece of meat, and they're relying on the fact that it's not
I'm saying for this with
milk and chicken, maybe, where it's a rabbinic thing, maybe, but it's like the probability of that is very, very low. There are other considerations that might come up. Glass is one. Chalav Yisrael to begin with might be another, but might be another. There are other considerations, and yeah,
How about in Chabad, like Moroccan Chabad household?
so it depends on the family whether they adopt Chabad custom or not. And I would be very frank with whoever I'm eating.
But if you're Chabad, you follow Ramah usually?
Yeah, and plus other stringencies that come along also.
Like I've seen Sparties put on
Yeah.
pots.
Okay, let's move ahead because it's a lot of material to get through, and
You
the time is going. All right, let's go. Dalet. Sorry? Dalet. Loy amru chaticha atzma nasis nevela. The principle that the piece of meat itself becomes an object of impurity, of non-kosher. ChaNaN. Ela b'basar b'chalav is limited to milk and meat. Because as we explained, milk and meat are inherently kosher. It's only in their mixture, in their cooking mixture, that they become not kosher. And therefore, every single part of the cooking mixture becomes itself not kosher. That the entire piece of meat is ChaNaN. Itself becomes prohibited. Assume this is not true of other prohibitions. This is the Mechaber's view, the Sephardic view. Going, for example, kazayas chelev, a kazayas or any little bit of fat, which is not kosher. It's been absorbed in a piece of meat. And the piece of meat does not have 60 ratio to nullify the fat that it absorbed. And therefore that piece of meat is prohibited. Now, and afterwards, this non-kosher piece of meat, or the kosher piece of meat that absorbed non-kosher, and is therefore forbidden, was now bishlai macheres, has been cooked into a stew with other pieces of meat. Ein tzarich ela shishim kedei kazayis chelav. You only need 60 to the ratio of the fat that was absorbed in that meat. But the meat itself is perfectly fine. And the meat itself can actually be combined with the rest of the stew to nullify that 60, that fat. Because why not? It's also kosher. Right now it lacks 60 to nullify it. But as soon as it joins with the rest of the pot, the rest of the stew, it can join with the rest of the stew to nullify the fat that's in it. And therefore, and therefore the piece of meat itself that originally was prohibited because it absorbed non-kosher is restored to being kosher.
It's counting into 60.
It's part of the 60 and therefore can be fully kosher.
This is just a reiteration.
This is limiting the ChaNaN to only milk and meat, not other prohibitions. Yeah, because other prohibitions, it's the absorption that makes it kosher. And once the absorption has been mixed into the rest of the pot, there's no reason to make anything non-kosher, as long as you have 60 against the ratio of the original absorption, original non-kosher. However, we remember from our introduction that the Shulchan Aruch elsewhere contradicts himself, where he says that even though it's true, you only need 60 in the stew to the ratio of the fat, not 60 to the ratio of the piece of meat. But nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch elsewhere rules that piece of meat should not be eaten.
Unlike
here, where he says that the piece of meat itself can return to kosher. And the ruling, even among Sephardic authorities, is that the piece of meat itself would be non-kosher, even though it is mixed into the rest of the stew. And even though you don't need 60 to the ratio of that piece of meat, you only need 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher it absorbed. But nonetheless, you should remove that piece of meat and not eat it. Clear? But that's elsewhere. That's not what it says here. Clear? Okay.
Here he
Yeah,
says that
okay.
that piece of meat reverts to being what?
That's what it says here, but that's contradiction elsewhere. It should be on the side by the Taz there. He should say that there's a contradiction and we follow the other place. Is there a Taz on the side?
There's a few of them.
I'll tell you which number. Taz 10.
Piece itself.
Taz 10?
Yeah, Taz 10. You here.
He cites
In Simon
two.
106, the Mechaber writes that the piece itself remains forbidden, and this is.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now to Ramah, which disagrees. Yesh Amir mothers say Damninon that we apply the standard the holy sort to any prohibition. The piece itself becomes forbidden. And therefore, the kosher piece of meat absorbed non-kosher fat, that piece of meat becomes non-kosher in its entirety. And when that piece of meat is mixed into another stew, you need 60 to the ratio of that piece of the entire piece of meat, not just the 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher that it absorbed. This is the custom in Ashkenaz. Pashut, that's been the standard accepted. And therefore, the Ein L'Shanis, one should not change in this custom.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
Yes.
a contradiction.
It's a
real
machlekes.
contradiction.
It's a full machlekes. Right? This is, of course, is rabbinic. as we just explained and we explained on Sunday, it's only rabbinic considering that there's nothing wrong with the meat itself. It didn't do anything wrong. Went by milk and meat. The meat itself is part of the problem because the meat is part of the problem that makes it usher because it mixed with milk. Whereas when meat absorbs non-kosher fat, the meat itself didn't do anything wrong. It only absorbed non-kosher fat. So why should you have 60 against the ratio of piece of meat? Rabbinic. 2 reasons to be stringent. We mentioned on Sunday. Reason 1 is because you want to apply the same standard as basar b'chalav. You shouldn't have different standards in different sets of laws. And the same way by basar b'chalav, we treat the entire piece of meat as if it's itself not kosher. So with other prohibitions, we'll treat the entire thing as if it's not kosher. Reason A. Reason B is because the piece of meat itself will never fully exfoliate the flavor that was originally absorbed in it. And therefore, that itself remains prohibited, even though it's part of a stew now that does have 60 to the ratio of the original flavor. But you couldn't, for example, like we mentioned this on Sunday, if a pot absorbed non-kosher, you boil it and make it exfoliate, and it's back to being kosher. You cannot do that with food. Because you cannot do it with the food, that means the original piece of meat still retains some of the non-kosher and thus should be prohibited, at least rabbinically. Okay. There is the minority view, which says that even by other prohibitions, it's biblical, but that's a minority view. And because it's rabbinic, we're going to be lenient in a bunch of cases. And not just it's rabbinic and it's a matter of dispute. So in scenarios where there are other reasons to be lenient, we'll rely on the mechaber who's lenient to begin with and doesn't apply ChaNaN to other prohibitions. Yes? We mentioned this Sunday and we'll come up to such cases. Clear? Yeah, clear? Forward. Now, the dafka, this is only true. This is only true if the piece of meat absorbed the non-kosher and became forbidden prior to its mixture into the rest of the stew, which gives it time to become ChaNaN. Under 2 conditions does this happen. Either if the prohibited item is attached to the kosher item, and therefore, the way we explained it on Sunday, and therefore, the kosher item that's attached to the prohibited will be the first to absorb that non-kosher flavor, and in that moment will become ChaNaN. So if you had a piece of non-kosher fat still attached to a kosher piece of meat and cooked in a stew altogether, that piece of meat which is attached to the non-kosher fat, according to the Ramah, is ChaNaN. Why? Using the logic we just said now, because it absorbs first the non-kosher, becomes ChaNaN, and then the non-kosher goes to the rest of the stew. Clear?
Only if it's the 160. No?
If the original piece of meat doesn't have 60 to nullify it. It doesn't have 60 to nullify it. It becomes ChaNaN, and then I need to have 60 against the whole piece of meat, not just against the fat.
But the stew needs to have 60 against the piece of meat.
Against the piece of meat, not just against the fat. Why? Because the piece of meat absorbs the fat first, and it becomes ChaNaN. Now, therefore, let's think this logic through and apply some interesting ideas with respect to this davuk. Okay. If we apply that, let's just say let's say I took if a non-kosher item isn't attached to a kosher item, but is completely enveloped by a kosher item. Would the same thing apply? Because the answer would be yes, if the rationale is, and then cooked in the same gravy. Do I have to have 60 to the ratio of the fat that's not kosher, or do I have to have 60 to the ratio of the meat that surrounds the fat too? If the idea is of the Ramah that when non-kosher is attached to kosher, the kosher absorbs the non-kosher first, and therefore I have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire kosher meat, not just the ratio of the fat, because the meat became ChaNaN. The same thing would happen if I enveloped a piece of if a kosher item envelops a non-kosher item. It absorbs the non-kosher item first, and therefore I have to have 60 to the ratio of the whole kosher, not just against the non-kosher that's inside. Right? And therefore, it's an interesting thing he says here. Let's say you have a meat, a krepla, like a meat kreplach, right? So you have meat that's enveloped in
So,
dough, and you cooked it. It's raw, but now you cooked it in a mixture that has milk in it. So do you need 60 times the ratio of the meat, or 60 times the ratio of the dough and the meat? But if I use the logic of the Ramah, that the thing that's closest to it or attached to it absorbs first, then that dough is absorbing the milk before the rest of the stew is absorbing the milk. In that time when the dough absorbs the meat first, it becomes ChaNaN. And then I have to have 60 to ratio of the entire dough and meat, not just against the meat. Interesting scenario.
or there's another way. Or there's another way.
Or you say the attachment has to be a natural attachment, like fat is to piece of meat, not that it's surrounding. Yeah. Right. And the same thing would be true of even rabbinic, because the rationale is that the kosher item near it absorbs first. Following that rationale, the same thing would apply to rabbinic prohibition, because it absorbs the rabbinic prohibition first, and if you need 60 to the ratio of that which absorbs first. Yeah, we clear on this? Okay, back to the text of the Shulchan Aruch. We clear? So again, the Ramah says that we apply the standard of ChaNaN even to other prohibitions, not just milk and meat, but only when the item has a chance to absorb the non-kosher before it gets cooked into the rest. Either because dafke ima iser davuk b'chaticha seter, if the prohibited item is attached to the kosher item, and that allows the kosher item that particular item to absorb the non-kosher, become ChaNaN, and then it gets mixed into the rest. And therefore the rest has to have 60 to the ratio of the entire kosher piece, not just to the non-kosher. Or the entire piece is outside the stew. A prohibited item falls onto this piece of meat that's outside of the stew. And in that time, it becomes ChaNaN. Now, when it gets mixed into the rest of the stew, I need 60 to the ratio of the whole piece of meat, not just 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher absorbed. Yeah, clear? Avo. However, if the meat is partially submerged under the inside the stew and partially above, the eina is davuk, and there's no prohibited items attached to it. It's only that a non-kosher piece of fat fell onto the part of meat that was protruding above the stew. Yeah. So what did we say in the last week? Last week we learned the same scenario, but with milk and meat. So you have a piece of meat that's partially protruding above the stew, and a piece of milk, a little drop of milk falls onto the piece of meat that's popping out of the stew. What ratio do you have to have? To the meat, to the milk, or to the meat as well? What did we learn last week?
The meat as well.
That I must need to have 60 to the ratio of the meat as well. But that itself was a stringency, because there are opinions which say, because it's in the stew, you only need 60 to the ratio of the milk, not 60 to the ratio of the meat and the milk. Remember this from last week?
It depended also if you stirred it right away, no?
Assuming we didn't stir it right away.
Assuming
we didn't stir it right away, yes? Because we have to give time for ChaNaN. But there are those that say that we learned this last week, that a piece of meat that's partially in the stew and partially out of the stew is treated as if it's fully in the stew. And therefore, there are those that say this. And therefore, if the milk fell on the part of the meat that was protruding above the stew, it doesn't matter. You only need 60 to the ratio of the milk, not 60 to the ratio of the piece of meat. Came the Ramah and said, we're going to be stringent. And you need 60 to the ratio of the entire meat. And now he's telling you to do stringent, not just with respect to milk and meat, but also with respect to other prohibitions. Two stringencies equal a leniency. Follow? So in the case of, let's go through this.
Here it would be the opposite.
Exactly. So two stringencies equal a leniency. Let's explain. You have a piece of meat that's partially above the stew. Non-kosher fell onto the part that's protruding. There are two reasons to now treat this piece of non-kosher as if it fell into the entire stew and needs 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher rather than 60 to the ratio of the piece of meat it fell onto. There are two reasons to say that. A, because some people say that the whole idea of ChaNaN doesn't apply to other prohibitions except for milk and meat. B, even if it were milk, there are those that say that because it's partially in the stew, you only need 60 to the ratio of the milk. Now, we happen to be stringent on both of these grounds when they are not together.
Separate.
When it's just a question of milk that fell onto a piece of meat partially protruding, we're going to be stringent. And when it's a question of non-kosher that falls onto kosher, we're going to say ChaNaN and be stringent. But now you're combining two reasons to be stringent, not will be lenient. And therefore, follow? This is a principle that's going to come up throughout all of Taruvus, all of the Basar B'Chalaf, everywhere. When you have two reasons to be stringent, you end up being lenient. Let me rephrase that. If being stringent here means we are taking on two stringencies, we're going to be lenient.
On both.
We're going to be lenient because I would need
That's
to.
because all of it.
I would need to take two extremes to be stringent now. I'm not taking two extremes. One extreme at a time I'll take, not two.
That's because both of them are durabanan.
Correct. So it's there, and it's machlekes. And it's machlekes.
It wouldn't be durabanan.
So number
It's
one,
different, right?
that's right. Sorry.
If it wouldn't be durabanan, one of them wouldn't be durabanan.
Okay, then we'll get to
That would be
kufiyut, which is
different,
specs
right?
veka. Now you have doubt and doubt. That's a separate issue. We're going to get to that soon. But let's just imagine. Here's a
Okay.
question of machlekes.
Understand.
You have two disputes. We're taking the stringent
Yeah.
view of both disputes. But when both of these stringencies converge, we're going to go lenient. Like in this case, the piece of meat that's partially protruding outward and a little non-kosher piece of meat little non-kosher fat falls on the meat that's protruding outward. I have two reasons to be lenient. A, because according to the Machaber, anytime non-kosher falls onto a meat, I don't say ChaNaN. B, even for milk and meat, there are those that Machaber and others say that I don't need 60 to the ratio of the whole meat because it's in the stew, at least partially in the stew. And because in order for me to be stringent, I need to rely on two stringencies. I'm not going to go so far. Clear? This is an important principle. If in order to maintain stringency, you need to go to two extremes, we're going to stay lenient, as in this case. I would have to be stringent, A, that other prohibitions have ChaNaN, B, that partially protruding meat also has to get ChaNaN. Now, I take the stringencies, but when they're separate from each other, not when they collide, as in this case. Clear? So let's keep going. So again, if it's partially in and out if it's partially submerged and partially above the stew, and a little bit of non-kosher meat fat falls on the meat that's protruding outward, or the part of meat that's protruding outward, we do not apply the standard of ChaNaN, and the entirety of the stew can be used to nullify that little bit of non-kosher, and I don't have to nullify the entire piece of meat. Nonetheless, that piece of meat should be removed because at the end of the day, it did absorb the non-kosher first, so take it out. But the rest of the stew doesn't need 60 to the ratio of that piece of meat. It only needs 60 to the ratio of the fat that was in that meat. Right? And therefore, all of this is Bishari Surim, about the prohibitions. Where in the other prohibitions, the mixture is not the problem, it's the absorption that's the problem. And therefore, to begin with, there's room to not say ChaNaN. But we're being stringent to being saying ChaNaN. But when it comes to milk and meat, where absorption is not the issue, mixture is the issue. And because mixture is the issue, even if the milk is not attached to the meat, they're just commingling. And part of the meat is in the stew, part of it is out of the stew. Then we're going to say ChaNaN. Because the milk and meat mixture itself becomes not kosher. Both the meat and the milk play a part in the non-kosher nature of this food, and therefore all of it becomes non-kosher biblically, and therefore we're going to apply all the stringencies, even in cases where the meat's partially out or partially in. Clear? Okay.
So when meat and milk, the whole thing will be
Sorry?
Asr. With meat and milk, the whole thing will be Asr.
You'd have to have 60 to the ratio of the
You have to have
entire
60,
piece,
the entire
not just to the
piece.
milk that's absorbed in the
And
piece.
here if it's just unkosher fats, whatever, that fell on a kosher piece that's outside of the reitev, then you could remove that piece and you could have the rest.
So it never
If
mixed
it's 60 times the fat. It's 60 times the fat.
for the meat
not
that's
60
partially,
times
if
the
it's
meat.
partially submerged and partially out, yes.
Partially
If it's completely out,
Right.
then I remove it. There's no problem at all with the rest of the
If it would
stew.
have been
If I
milk
mixed
that
it
you
in,
poured-
then I do
if
say
you-
ChaNaN.
If you put milk on it, then the whole thing wouldn't be any.
Then you'd have to have 60 to the ratio of the
That's
entire
about
piece of
60.
meat.
Right, for the whole meat.
Correct.
And here, if it's fat, then you can have 60 against the
The
fat.
fat, not against the piece of
Not
meat.
the
Correct. Provided that piece of meat is partially submerged in the
Yeah.
in the
That's
stew.
partially submerged, right.
Okay. If it was out of the stew,
That was different.
and then it got mixed in, I would have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire piece of meat,
Right.
because then I say
Which we
ChaNaN,
covered before.
even
We
by that,
covered
we'd be covered at the
above.
beginning, correct?
Covered that above.
Yeah, okay. Now, considering that ChaNaN, the prohibition of mixtures, is different in milk and meat. Sorry, considering the ChaNaN, that the piece of meat itself should become prohibited because of what it absorbed, is different between milk and meat versus other prohibitions. Because by other prohibitions, it's a question of absorption, and by milk and meat, it's a question of mixture, and the meat itself is playing a part of the prohibition here. Considering that distinction, so now we have to go to other situations in which maybe you should apply ChaNaN, maybe you shouldn't apply ChaNaN, and will be stringent by milk and meat and lenient by other prohibitions. Clear? Like we did with the case of the meat that's partially protruding.
Here, we were stringent on the meat and milk.
Correct?
Right.
So we just did this by the meat that's partially protruding,
Right.
where we are stringent by milk and meat to
Right.
treat it ChaNaN, but
Right.
not stringent by
Correct.
thing. Okay. So
Yeah.
similar things can happen now, again, other cases.
Uh-huh.
Yesh Oimim, there are those that say the lo yamrin ChaNaN, we do not say chafti chanas available. We don't say that the item itself becomes prohibited. In nisarev isser lach balach. Beheter lach. If prohibited liquid gets mixed with
Allowable.
a kosher liquid. So you have, let's say, non-kosher fat that mixed in with kosher fat. The whole fat's rendered, so it's liquid. Yeah, and then this mixture of kosher and non-kosher fat, which doesn't have a 60 of kosher to the ratio of non-kosher, and therefore that whole mixture is forbidden. But then now the entire mixture got mixed into a kosher stew. So do I need 60 against the whole original mixture of both non-kosher and kosher fat, or just 60 against the prohibited fat? What do I need?
60 against the prohibited fat.
So 60 against the prohibited fat, because again, it's a double stringency. The idea of liquids itself becoming ChaNaN is a stringency. The idea of non-kosher fats making ChaNaN is also stringency. So I'm going to be lenient here, not taking on two extremities. And therefore, you only need 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher that was in it. And therefore, you can rely on this by other prohibitions, if there is a great loss. Not by milk and meat. Because in milk and meat, the mixture is itself biblical. And therefore, I'm going to apply the stringency that this mixture problem of ChaNaN applies even to liquids. Clear?
No, I didn't understand. The hefsek gadol. I mean, let's go back to the liquid now.
It's other prohibitions or it's milk and meat?
Got that. But
Sorry, which one?
But
Yeah,
hefsek gadol, it refers to the part above, saying it wouldn't be permitted. We talked about
you can rely on this leniency. There is the view which says
but
that
so why do we need the hefsek gadol?
Say again?
So why do we need the hefsek gadol?
Why do you need hefsek gadol? Why not just apply the fact
that two
double
stringencies? Two double stringencies.
Why dafka hefsek gadol? Good question.
Why do we need hefsek gadol?
Why do you have to go good question. You have double leniency.
That's as he is explaining that double leniency.
Wait, let's go through it. You have double leniency. Why? Yeah. I don't know why we have to. Why here you need the question?
Let's say hefsek gadol. What do you need the hefsek gadol? You
just
said it's
good question. Good question. Why can't we just rely on the? Why here do I need hefsek gadol? Whereas in the previous case, I don't need hefsek gadol. I just rely on the fact that it's two stringencies.
Is that what it's referring to, or it's referring to?
Okay, so I think the reason is, I'll tell you, the answer is,
no.
I'll tell you the answer.
I'll tell you what you said isn't correct.
Yeah.
Because he's not saying it's on the second case. He's saying yesh lismeich l'samach al zeh b'shar yisur.
By lach. So I have two leniencies. I have two leniencies here.
Yeah, but
1 second. I'll walk it through. I thought your question. What's a good question? But I have the answer for you.
Okay. Good.
So you have number one. There's a dispute whether or not liquids have the din of ChaNaN.
Right.
A. B. I have a dispute whether or not ChaNaN applies to other prohibitions.
Right.
So if I have these two together, liquid plus other prohibitions, I should be lenient.
Right.
So why do I need hefsek gadol? Why do I need great loss? That was your question.
Right.
Yeah. Answer: because the view which says that ChaNaN does apply to liquid is the majority view. It's the overwhelming majority view. It's a very small minority. It's not like an even dispute. It's an overwhelming majority that says that the liquid does have ChaNaN. That's the answer. That's the reason.
Isn't yesh lismeich al zeh b'shari surim?
You can rely
on other cases? Aren't we talking
no
about
other
all
prohibitions
like,
besides from milk and meat.
all like cases?
No, shari suri means other prohibitions apart from milk and meat, where it's non-kosher fat and kosher fat, other than milk and meat. Shari suri means other prohibitions except for milk and meat, where the mixture is the issue. So you can rely on other prohibitions. You can rely on that minority view in other prohibitions when there's a great loss.
And here we didn't need a great. So here we need
Because
a
over
great
there was
loss.
much more even out machlekes. Here it's an overwhelming majority saying that you do say ChaNaN by liquids.
Balach.
You do.
You do say.
Yes. So now what we have is like this. When it comes to milk and meat, we do apply the standard of ChaNaN even if it's liquid. Right? So here's a very important element, which is as long as what you're looking even though the Shulchan Aruch here describes it where you have kosher liquid being mixed with non-kosher liquid, the same applies if non-kosher liquid is if kosher liquid absorbs non-kosher flavor from a non-liquid.
Another case, different case.
Yes, but the same principle applies. That's what we're learning here, even though it's not explicitly in Shulchan Aruch.
Is it because
explain this.
understand the Lashon Yesh Eimrim?
No, nothing to do with Lashon Shulchan Aruch. Just understand the logic. If you have, let's say, let's say like this: you have a chicken soup, right? And dry cheese falls into the chicken soup. There's not 60 to the ratio. You take out the milk. You take out the piece of cheese. The entire chicken soup is not chicken soup. That's rabbinic. Let's make it biblical. It's a meat soup. It's a meat broth. And a piece of cheese falls in. Take the piece of cheese out.
And you eat
There's no 60 to the ratio.
And
You can't eat that broth now because it doesn't have 60 to the ratio of the milk.
Of course.
Now that broth gets poured into the rest of your big ChaNaN stew.
I see.
The chicken, the meat stock is now being poured into your stew.
Right.
Do I say ChaNaN and I have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire broth, the entire
Clearly, it's
beef
Basar
stock?
B'Cholim. Clearly.
Oh, even though it was
Clearly, it's
a
Basar B'Cholim.
correct.
But that's not our case here.
One second.
Hold on.
Even though, hold on a second, even though it's a case of a yavesh in a lach and not lach balach, what the Shulchan Aruch says. The same thing still applies.
So, but
But what about, sorry?
by that logic,
Yeah.
so let's say I have a pot. So I have a stew. It doesn't equal the 60. I can't eat that stew anymore.
Yeah.
You're saying I could pour that stew into a bigger pot?
No, you can't pour it in because you're not allowed to be mavatal isser. But if it did fall in, and it's 60 to the ratio, you would have kosher.
It did fall
Yeah.
in. We can't
The
pour
ch-
it. Okay,
now we
so
take
that's
this-
what I was wondering.
We take this so far when it comes to milk and meat that we apply the standard to even rabbinic and even if it's cold. So let's just say, right?
Even if it's cold.
Yeah. Therefore, if you have, let's say, a cold chicken soup and a cold little bit of milk fell in there, you can't extract the milk. Right? So the milk and chicken soup are now mixed up together. There isn't 60 of chicken soup against a little bit of milk. That entire chicken soup is prohibited. And if you were to pour that, if that chicken soup were to pour it into if that bowl of chicken soup, which is cold, is to be poured into your chicken soup pot, you'd have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire bowl of chicken soup, not just to the ratio of the milk. Because we say ChaNaN by lach balach, we say ChaNaN.
Explain me the logical connection with what you're saying, for where here we're talking lach balach, but not Basar B'Cholim.
He does say bas b'chalav. He
Here we're
says,
not talking about
Avaloy b'basar b'chalav.
Avaloy b'Basar
Don't
B'Cholim.
rely on the
We're talking-
leniency by
No, we're talking-
listen. Don't rely on the leniency by basar b'chalav, which means by
course.
basar b'chalav you have to be stringent.
Of course.
So now you have a little bit of milk mixed into your chicken soup. That's lach balach.
Yes,
So the entire chicken soup is ChaNaN.
correct.
If that bowl of chicken soup fell into your big pot, you have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire bowl, not just the milk. Because
Mhm.
we say ChaNaN by lach balach.
Do we
Of-
understand that the majority
Clear?
opinion says that even the lach balach, when it's taruves,
Other
is-
sort of,
is
other
yesh-
sort of.
yesh amrim means that this is a minority opinion?
The yesh omen was being lenient. Look, read carefully. Yesh omen, those say the loya min ChaNaN in this Arab is lach balach. There's a minority
right.
opinion which says
So that's a
that
minority.
that
That's how we understood
ChaNaN
it was a
never
minority.
applies to lach balach.
That's how we
even by milk
understood
and
it was a minority opinion.
That's right. Even by milk and meat, there are those who say we don't say ChaNaN by liquids.
Okay.
But we're not going to rely on that small opinion unless it's other prohibitions. Plus, have submitted over great loss. But when it comes to milk and meat, even if it's completely cold, if it's liquid and liquid, we say ChaNaN, even if it's rabbinic because it's chicken and milk, And even if it's cold, it's a cold little bit of soup, a little bit of milk into a cold chicken soup. We still say ChaNaN, and the entire chicken soup is problematic, and you need 60 to the ratio of the entire bowl of chicken soup, not just against the milk. Clear? Yes, clear?
Yeah.
Okay, weiter. Let's conclude. In this arev, yavish b'yavish, if dry and dry mixed together. So what's the case? The case is like this. You have two pieces of meat in front of you. Let's say one piece of meat is kosher and one piece of meat is not kosher. Right? Now, both of those pieces of meat fell into your kosher stew. Do I need 60 to the ratio of the entire piece of both pieces of meat? Or just to one?
One piece of meat.
Just to one? Even though if I were to look at these two outside the stew, I couldn't eat either of them. I would not be allowed to eat either of them.
Right.
Even biblically, I wouldn't be allowed to eat either of them.
Right.
Because biblically speaking, if I have three, I can say I don't know which one it is.
Right.
But if I have two, even biblically, I can't eat them. But when they fall in, it's not as if the one that I wasn't allowed to eat before now became a prohibited item.
Right.
And therefore, when it falls into the stew, I only need to take the ratio of the bigger of the two. Because maybe the bigger one's not kosher ones. And I take the ratio of the bigger of the two. And this will come up more in, he says here, so therefore, if two dry things fall in, or two dry pieces of meat mixed together, I don't know which one's kosher, which one's not. I don't say ChaNaN by any prohibition. So not just one kosher piece of meat and one non-kosher piece of meat, but two kosher pieces of meat, and one of them absorbed milk. So one of them is a basar b'chala piece of meat, and one of them is a fully kosher meat. And both those pieces of meat fall into my stew. I don't know which one's which. I only need 60 to the ratio of the bigger one, because maybe that's the one that's the milk and meat one, and take out both those pieces of meat because I couldn't eat either of them, and then the rest of the stew is okay, so long as I have 60 to the ratio of the bigger of the two, even if I don't have 60 to the ratio of both, even though I cannot eat either of them, because I don't say ChaNaN about that.
Can you purposely put both of them in?
You cannot proactively nullify a prohibition. It's only if it happened post factum. Yeah, that's the rule. Except for last week when we said that you can quickly mix it all together.
Right.
That was the one exception to the rule.
Right.
And even that was contended by some of the other halakhic authorities.
But if you pull both pieces of meat out right away, let's say they both fell in and you pull both of them out, would your pot still be okay even if it wasn't 60 to the ratio, if it was so fast, but didn't have time to cook?
That we learned already in Kufay, how fast cooking takes.
Right.
It's how hot it is. If it's hot, then it happens right away. If it's not so hot, if it's salting, it takes more time. If it's sharp, right? That was the mice in Kufay. When it comes to boiling, it happens right away, basically. Yeah. Okay, but I look at what's we're going to see more in Tzadik Tes about Chaticha Natsanavela. Finally, last halacha in the Ramah. Kli hanesa miblias iser, a vessel that absorbed non-kosher flavor. I don't say now that the entire pot became an item of prohibited, and you don't need 60 against the whole entire pot. So if a pot of meat absorbed non-kosher flavor, a pyre pot, a regular pot, absorbed non-kosher flavor, and then later I cooked a kosher stew in it, you don't need to have 60 to the ratio of the pot. You just have to have 60 to the ratio of what the pot absorbed. Because the pot does become Nasa Nevela. Right? Remember from the beginning. What was one of the reasons why we say Nasa Nevela by other Yisurim? Even though the only problem was absorption. And if it's absorption, let it be extracted. So one of the rationales was because you want to keep it equal to basar b'chalav. That doesn't apply to kalim. That doesn't apply to vessels. And the other rationale was when it comes to vessels, you can actually extract the flavor entirely. When it comes to a piece of meat, you cannot extract the flavor entirely. And therefore, on both accounts, there's no reason to apply ChaNaN to vessels. Right? But wait to see in Tzadik Ches, because let's say the pot absorbed kosher food. It's a used pot. So it has kosher food absorption. And then it absorbs non-kosher food. Does the kosher food that it absorbed become ChaNaN? So it absorbed you made a big stew full to the brim. So there's a lot of absorption from kosher food. And then, you fried a small little non-kosher item in that same pot. Do I now say I need 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher that's there? Or because the absorption from yesterday's stew all becomes ChaNaN, I need 60 to the ratio of that? That we'll discuss in Tzadik Tes. Meaning, could the ChaNaN not be applied to the vessel itself, but to the flavor that the vessel absorbed. Can I say chanan to that? Now we'll get
So
to the
I used the pot today.
Yep, for
uh,
kosher, for a
not
massive kosher
I
stew.
used for, pot is not kosher, cooked not kosher today,
Say it again?
right? And it's all washed out,
Yep,
okay? And now I'm gonna cook something kosher
within 24 hours.
within the 24 hours.
Yes.
So doesn't that liquid need to be 60 times the volume of the pot?
No, 60 times the volume of what the pot absorbed.
How
That's
would
what he's
I
saying
ever know
here.
what the pot absorbed?
Well, you know it was a small little steak, so it's not that much. You know it's a small thing. How do you know? Okay, we'll get to that in Tzaddik Ches actually also. It's a good question.
Cleaned it out though, right?
So
Yeah, I
again,
washed it in, of course.
actually, it's only if it's a new vessel. Okay, we're gonna get to that in Tzaddik Ches. If
I'm
you have to do it,
pretty-
you have to
I'm
go
pretty
around.
sure- I'm
A
sure-
brand new
I'm
vessel,
pretty sure it's gonna be 60 times the volume of the pot.
no,
Sure?
yeah.
The same day?
Which way did it go? You first did kosher, non-kosher.
Non-kosher.
You first put non-kosher.
Yeah. It's not kosher.
And then,
Pot's
then,
not kosher.
then, so if you put, let's
And
say,
now in the same day, I'm gonna have kosher.
okay,
Wash
let's
it,
just
I
say,
washed it.
okay, let's say you had a non-kosher, you did a small little shrimp. One shrimp, you cooked in that stew.
I said,
and
no,
that-
no, I had
in that
the whole pot.
Okay, so that's different. Now you have much more. Let's just imagine you had,
Well,
may
we
just-
use a big pot to cook a small thing.
No,
yeah,
but
just
that's
give me,
one-
it was a frying
have
pan.
pot, I
It's
have
a frying pan. So you fry your
Okay,
shrimp.
so I have a frying pan.
Okay, then in that frying pan, I made shakshuka,
Okay,
which is much more. So do I need to have 60 to the ratio of the entire pot because the whole pot became chanan? Or just the ratio of what the shrimp would have given to the pot? Answer, only to what the shrimp would have given to the pot, not to the entire pot because the pot did not become chanan.
And that's really interesting.
That's what we're saying here, right? It's not available.
not
Oh,
60
you only need
times to
60
the shrimp, but 60
60
times to
to what the
what
pot absorbed from the shrimp.
absorbed from the shrimp, which
Correct.
is like next to nothing.
Correct. Very little, which is much less. So again,
It's much less than the
Can
actual
we do the
shrimp itself.
question?
this is very important to remember because this is going to help us when we get to the problems of, which is going to be the major issues that are really going to come up in kitchens, is I use the milk pot by mistake for a meat thing and vice versa. How much actual milk was absorbed into that pot, B'chlal? How much was in there?
You don't know if you
And if you
did.
made a huge stew, do you not have 60 times the ratio of whatever milk it did absorb? Maybe you do. Because I'm not saying chanan about the whole pot, but then we're going to learn inside the class, well, maybe there's chanan about other things in the pot. We'll have to get to that. But this is going to be a relevant component when we answer questions in the kitchen where I accidentally use a pot for one thing or the other. This is going to be a relevant component. Yeah, okay. Clear? Any other questions we want to address
Can we do
before
the
we?
questions?
Sure.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
You
asking if
did,
you have any
didn't
questions that
finish.
you want to ask before we close.
But since you can't calculate it, don't you assume the full amount? Just to be sure, safe?
Not necessarily.
That's the shrimp example.
How much can it be? There's a maximum of how much it could be.
How much is the maximum?
Not the whole pot, which your shakshuka is,
No, I'm saying the whole shrimp.
right?
Would be the whole shrimp. the volume
Let's
of
say
the
you did
shrimp.
the volume of the whole shrimp. You still have more in your shakshuka.
Not 60 times. Not
Right.
60 times.
Depends how big it is. Depends how much it is.
Yeah.
It
So it's the
depends.
amount,
You might. But if you say chanan, you have to stick to the whole pot, right? If you said chanan, you need to have stick to the whole
A new
pot.
pot or a used old pot?
That's a good question. New pot dafka, because the old pot is another gedolim which we'll get to in Tzaddik.
Okay.
Because the old pot has other flavors in it, and those flavors could become chanan, even if the pot didn't become chanan. But the flavors that are had from before could become chanan.
So a new
And now you
pot,
need to
just-
stick. So this is dafka new pots.
You
Yes,
just take the volume of the shrimp, then you calculate.
Sorry?
it. You take the volume of the
Exactly.
shrimp.
that would be the maximum it could possibly be. It's less than that, but it's the maximum could be the size of the shrimp. It can't be more than that, right?
You can't, impossible to
We
calculate.
need AI.
Possible.
Calculation.
You do you
Okay.
get a glass of water, you put it in, and you see the displays.
Any
That's
other
why-
questions we want to address?
Oh, yeah. No,
There are
how
four
much it actually
questions.
absorbs, like-
Can we do the questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Piece of meat which becomes forbidden by milk
Yeah.
and then falls into a big pot.
Yeah.
And the pot has 60 times the milk, but not the entire piece of meat.
Yeah.
What's the halacha of the pot? And what's the halacha of the piece of meat?
You don't know what the halacha of the pot is, but what do you think?
Hmm?
What do you think?
Piece of meat which becomes forbidden by milk.
Yeah.
Forbidden means
Milk's been absorbed into it. You
more
don't have
than-
60 to the ratio of that
So
milk.
it's not 60 times.
So you
meat
apply
in it.
chanan now.
And then falls into a big pot, and the pot has 60 times the milk, but not 60 times the entire meat. So you can't eat the content of the pot.
You can't eat the content of the pot. What
And what's
happens
the
to your
halacha
pot
of the-
though?
What's the halacha of the piece of meat? Well, obviously,
It's
it's
a
in
piece
the
of meat.
pot, so it's also, you can't eat that. Couldn't have eaten
What
that.
about the pot? Does the pot need to be does the pot need to be kosherized?
Yeah.
Clearly.
Right.
Clearly.
You know why? Walk it through. No, I'm not saying you're wrong. Walk it through. Why?
What's the question?
See here, it's on page.
I'm not saying you're wrong. Just walk it through.
I'll put it there now.
Since the liquid in it was
The
not,
the
was-
piece of meat
not
is
permissible.
itself prohibited.
a piece of meat is ChaNaN,
The flavor and therefore any
The
flavor that
flavor-
milk exudes.
emanated throughout the whole thing,
Yes.
right? And it's not 60 times the piece of meat.
Mhm.
Therefore, since the whole thing is inedible, that means the pot is also not kosher.
Presumably. Yeah, I don't see it saying anywhere. Otherwise, yeah, I see that you're right.
What's
think
the
you're
halacha
right.
of the piece of meat? Well, obviously, the piece of
Yeah.
meat is no good. Next.
Yeah, I
Any
think that would be
other
correct. Let's
questions?
see.
Want to review the
Sorry.
question?
Okay, next question. Yeah.
It's good to review the question.
Yeah, sure.
Explain the meaning of chaticha nasi savela in your own words, and what is the disagreement between the Ramah and the Mechaber if chaticha nasi savela was said regarding other forbidden foods or only regarding basar b'chol? So this we covered in some detail. That chaticha nasi savela is sourced from the idea of milk and meat,
Biblically,
basar b'chalav, biblically, because you're talking about two items that are both permissible.
and only
the
become
problem is
prohibited.
only in their combination.
Correct.
And so, and that, according to the Mechaber, does not extend to Tarufos,
To other
to
Isurim.
other Isurim, but to the Ramah it does, and it's the Rabban.
Correct.
Okay, 3, an attached Isur. Let's say a tomato, which has a worm inside of it,
Hmm.
which was cooked in a pot with
Oh.
many other vegetables,
We should have answered that.
which includes 60 times the worm, but not the tomato. What's the halacha of the dish?
What do you guys
What's
say?
the halacha of the tomato?
What do you guys say?
Okay.
What do you guys say?
What do you say?
It's
No.
a burial. We didn't talk
Yeah,
about
we
it.
discussed this.
6 times tomato.
It's a tomato which
Why?
has a worm inside.
Spell it out.
of
Why? Because what was the vort of ChaNaN for the Ramah? That if it's going to absorb in the thing that's attached to, what was the vort of Davok for the Ramah? Attachment. Because it's going to be
First,
absorbed
it's
in the
gonna be
item it's
absorbed
attached
by
to
the
first.
tomato.
The tomato becomes ChaNaN.
The tomato becomes
You'd have
ChaNaN,
to have
and
50
you need
iteration of
60
ChaNaN.
times against
Yeah.
the potato.
Assuming that
But
the
if you
tomato
say-
completely
if you say
envelops
differently,
the
Worm. For sure, that's what I'm saying. It's not touching it.
it's inside, correct? It's that would be Davok.
You have to make sure to find the tomato though, or else can you eat this burial? That's
Find the
nice.
tomato?
Sure, the tomato you have to throw out.
No, that's you
But
can't
then you
find
have-
it. They're all identical to
How
tomato.
did
So then,
Someone your worker mixed it in. You didn't know.
But
You
you don't know which tomato it
You're
is.
getting rid of it.
Yeah.
If you don't know which tomato it is,
You're getting rid of the whole thing because
might
it's
have-
60 times. You only have 60 times the worm, but not 60 times the
so
tomato.
correct.
So the
Oh,
whole
so
thing
the
is
whole
gone.
thing's the beginning. Yeah.
Everything is gone.
So everything's gone.
The tomato's gone. The
Yeah.
roitiv is gone. The whole thing's gone.
Right, that's correct. The case, but if you had 60 times the ratio of tomato and you didn't know which you didn't know which tomato it would be, you'd have to remove all the tomatoes probably.
This burial, you can't eat a live creature.
And then you're going to
Question,
be
I don't know the
okay.
answer to that.
And then you're going to be okay because it's not what we call coveted. It's not
It's not royal escabed.
Yeah.
Do tomatoes count as royal escabed?
not some royal
It depends how it's
tomato.
Yeah, probably not. I don't know what
Probably
to
not.
say.
It's not a
Good question.
meal. It's not
No.
something you.
We'll have to
You
get.
don't,
Sorry.
you don't eat tomatoes by themselves.
What?
I like this case. Very sound.
Yeah. But
Okay,
here, this is the
4.
one where there isn't ratio to the whole tomato, and therefore the whole thing is not kosher anyway because it absorbed in the tomato first. Yeah. Okay.
4 liquid.
It's actually possible that we dispute because there is. Okay, so I've been going with the reason for davuk because it absorbs in that one first. There are those that say.
Inside.
Yeah, there are those that say that the reason for davuk is because if that piece of meat with the thing that's attached to ends up outside the liquid at any point, it becomes ChaNaN then, because it's attached to it. Would that apply to the case of the tomato, that logic? Probably also, yeah, the same ChaNaN applies, never mind. Keep going.
Okay, 4.
Yeah.
Fourth and last. Liquid meat gravy containing 20% non-kosher ingredients, which falls into a dish which has 60 times the originally forbidden percentage, but not the entire quantity of the pot's gravy. What is the halacha of the dish? And is there the possibility to be lenient in a case of great monetary loss?
No.
So one more time. Liquid meat gravy containing 20% non-kosher ingredients,
Right, so it's
which
a
falls
liquid.
into a dish. So that meat gravy falls into a dish which has 60 times the originally forbidden percentage.
It
but
falls
not the
into your
entire
it falls into your
quantity of
stew,
the pot's gravy.
right?
What is the halakha of the dish? It shouldn't be used.
Because it's ChaNaN. Because ChaNaN by
ChaNaN.
lach.
It's ChaNaN.
It comes
We
together
say
in-
ChaNaN by lach.
Otherwise,
Sorry.
only, but because there's yesh emrim, and there's another opinion that says such a thing would be only according to the 20% non-kosher ingredients. So if there's a possibility to be lenient in the case of great monetary loss.
Correct. Correct.
It doesn't make the 20%
Very good.
doesn't make a difference. I don't understand how it's relevant.
Sure,
He's just
sure.
saying that it's not 60%. That's all. He's saying it's that the original wasn't nullified by 60. That's what he's trying to say. That's all.
No, the 60, the 20%
It means that the
is-
original
is nullified in 60.
it's
the
nullified in
whole
60 in the
thing is
new.
not
It's
nullified in
nullified in 60 in the new mixture, not in the original mixture.
Yeah.
Right, in the new mixture.
But
In the original lach
only-
malacha wasn't
it only
nullified.
matter- it
You have a
only matters in the
gravy,
original.
you have a gravy
Sorry?
and there's a dish, and the gravy is 20%, and then you pour it into, the gravy is 20% not kosher, and you pour it into a dish. Okay?
Yeah,
Now, that dish has 60 times the not kosher in the gravy,
yeah.
but it doesn't have 60 times the entire
You
gravy,
need the gravy because it's ChaNaN.
because you need the gravy because it's kind
So
of.
Correct.
it would only
But-
be if it was 60 times, then
but-
it would overpower the.
Correct.
But.
But have
the
some we can
monetary
leave.
loss,
Oh,
you
have
could-
some ruba.
because
Oh,
I-
by lach
By lach balach, they can be lenient by hefsim ruba.
Okay.
By shar isurim, not by basa b'chala.
But son?
Other prohibitions. Shar isurim, other
Ah.
prohibitions.
But
Like shayin aleph reish, shar.
by basar b'chala.
Then you can't be lenient even by
But
hefsim
this
ruba.
gravy, this meat gravy, we don't know what it makes. It didn't say what it makes.
It's non-kosher fat. Let's just say.
Ah.
In the case of basa b'chala, lach balach, you cannot be lenient even hefsim ruba.
Yeah.
Because there it's a biblical ChaNaN. Okay, Yidna, wonderful evening. So I think for next Sunday, keep an eye on the group. I'm going to be in New York, but I hope to be able to do it on Zoom.
this
I'm
coming
going to McKinnos. I hope to be able to do it on Zoom in the morning. I want to keep the same time.
There's no
You're going
possibility
to
to do all the classes in the morning. There's no possibility for that.
Oh, yeah?
To do
I
it.
tried, and I tried doing it on Friday mornings. It didn't really take off so much.
No?
I tried having this class on Friday morning
I'm
also. It didn't really
going to
take off.
England for 2.5 weeks now.
Sorry?
I'm going to England for 2.5 weeks.
So we
when
have one
you
more
have
week
it
of
at 8
learning,
o'clock
then
at
after that
night-
is all Chazzarah.
Yeah, when you have it at 8 o'clock at night, it's like 3
Oh,
o'clock in the morning.
So it's only going to be next Wednesday. Wednesday, I'll have an issue.
Still have one.
Next Wednesday is an issue.
Will be because I'll be late at night. Then afterwards, it's going to be Chazzarah.
All these other guys.
Oh, we'll do Chazzarah Shir
No,
also.
but that's also going to be, you're also going to make it at 5
I
o'clock.
think I'm
or
going to
8
do
o'clock.
Chazzarah Shir. I think I'm going to do in the morning, Sunday morning.
Sunday morning. So Sunday morning, okay, but Wednesday,
We'll have to see if I
Wednesday
need 2
evening.
shirim a week for Chazzarah. We'll
Wednesday
see.
evening.
Sorry?
Sunday evening, I can't make it.
When do you go?
Okay,
Right, okay.
For
that's what it is.
made $40.
Okay. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Oh my.